Okay, let's dig into this. For anyone following the WNBA, I mean, right now feels like this really pivotal, high-stakes collision point.
Definitely.
You've got the annual drama, right? The draft lottery dictating future talent. But that's just running headlong into these critical labor negotiations for the CBA.
Right, the collective bargaining agreement.
And on top of all that, the league's simultaneously managing the structural headache and opportunity of expansion. Everything's happening at once.
It's fascinating, isn't it, how these three things, the mechanics of the draft, the money side with the CBA, and then the growing pains you get from expansion, they're completely interconnected.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if one piece of that puzzle shifts, the whole league structure, it kind of changes. So our mission for this deep dive really is to pull out the key insights from the sources we've looked at to understand exactly how the league is being fundamentally reshaped for the long term.
So we've got a pretty tight focus today. First, we'll break down the mechanics of the draft lottery and pay special attention to how trades, are now basically weaponizing the lottery system.
That's a huge part of it.
Second, we'll move past just the names and look at the sort of strategic depth of the incoming talent.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, we're going to spend significant time on those critical structural issues with the CBA deadline and the very complex reality of going from 12 to 15 teams.
Okay, let's jump straight into the immediate excitement then. The annual draft lottery, it's set for November 23rd.
Coming up soon.
Yeah. And for the 14th straight year, the results, they'll be broadcast on ESPN.
Yeah.
Bethany Donovan, the WNBA head of league operations, she'll be the one handling the reveal.
Right. Okay, so knowing the date is one thing, but understanding how the odds are calculated, that feels like the real core knowledge nugget here for people.
Absolutely.
It's not just, the worst team in 2024 gets the best shot. It's not that simple.
Precisely. The lottery odds, they're calculated based on the 2-year cumulative results of the 5 teams that did not make the postseason this past year.
2 years. That's the key part.
Crucial distinction, yeah. The league put this longer-term look-back system in place specifically to try and discourage blatant, single-season intentional losing.
Right, the tanking we always hear about.
Exactly. You kind of have to struggle consistently for 2 years to really maximize your chances.
And that system brings us straight to the Dallas Wings. Based on those cumulative results, I mean, they are the clear favorite. They're holding a huge 42% chance to get the top pick.
For the second year in a row.
Second year in a row. And get this, they're guaranteed no worse than the number 3 pick. That lack of downside risk, I mean, that's just phenomenal leverage.
It is massive. I mean, think about it. They're basically sitting pretty no matter how the ping pong balls bounce.
Yeah.
And this is a team, remember, that drafted Paige Bueckers, number 1, just last year.
Yeah.
So if they win that top slot again, they could be building a foundational dynasty, purely through the draft.
Wow.
And that security, it means they can swing for the fences maybe, or crucially, use that high pick as incredible trade bait.
Okay, so here's where the system gets, complicated. Because asset management, it seems like it's found a way to kind of supersede the original idea behind the anti-tanking thing.
Right.
We've got teams that actually performed really well last season, suddenly holding very high lottery odds.
And I think you're probably talking about the Minnesota Lynx there.
Exactly.
They are the perfect example, really, of how some front office savvy, can turn a past trade into this huge future advantage. The Lynx actually finished the regular season with one of the best records in the WNBA.
Right, before losing in the semis.
Before losing in the semis. Yet they have a strong 26% chance at the number 1 pick.
And that's all down to the fact that they own the Chicago Sky's first-round pick from some previous trade.
That's it. The Sky's 2-year cumulative record puts that pick high up in the lottery. And now the Lynx, a really competitive team, stands to benefit massively.
Mm-hmm.
And this raises a pretty important question, I think. If a team that just played in the semifinals can effectively jump the line using a trade, doesn't that fundamentally undermine the whole competitive balance idea, the intent of rewarding only the struggling teams?
That feels like the real insight here. The currency of the league isn't just money anymore. It's about acquiring future draft capital from franchises that are struggling. You're basically betting on another team's sustained misfortune.
Well put.
And looking at the rest of the field, you see similar situations, right? Seattle, for instance, they own the Los Angeles Sparks' top pick. That gives them a 16.7% chance.
And then Washington, they have just under a 10% chance. Then you see the Chicago Sky show up again, but this time they own the Connecticut Sun's first-round choice. That gives them the lowest odds in the lottery field, about 5.5%.
Right.
But look at those teams. Minnesota, Seattle, Chicago. These are competitive teams, all leveraging assets they got from teams whose cumulative failures put those picks high up the board.
It's just a remarkable realignment mechanic, isn't it? It shows that a smart trade years ago can actually yield a better outcome than winning games today, at least when you're talking draft position.
It really does.
And speaking of realignment, before we transition topics, Dallas just introduced their new coach, Jose Fernandez, longtime head coach at South Florida.
Yeah, just recently.
So how does having a coach with a new system potentially affect who they might target with that guaranteed top 3 pick, especially since, as the sources say, there's no consensus superstar this year?
That's the perfect pivot, actually, to the talent pipeline. Because a new coach often means a new offensive identity, maybe a different defensive focus.
Sure.
Fernandez, he's known for player development. So if they do get that number 1 pick, their choice probably won't be as obvious as it was last year with Bueckers. The sources are pretty clear. They indicate there is no clear-cut number 1 pick in the draft.
That seems like the most significant piece of info regarding this draft class, actually. It suggests teams are looking at a deep class, lots of quality talent, rather than just one singular generational superstar.
Precisely. And if there's no consensus star, the strategic value of that pick, it changes, doesn't it?
Oh, so?
Well, if I'm Dallas or maybe Minnesota with that Sky pick, do I use that top pick to draft a very good player? Or do I maybe look to trade the pick for an established veteran who fits my new coach's system better right now?
So interesting.
The value is more spread out, which makes it maybe an ideal bargaining chip.
So it's a pick with high value, but it's less concentrated, which forces GMs to be, well, shrewd, smart about it.
Exactly.
Okay, for those listening who want to track the names being linked to the top of the draft, the sources we looked at point to players like UCLA's Lauren Betts, Ozzie Fudd from UConn, Flau J. Johnson out of LSU, and Olivia Miles from TCU. Those are some names you'll probably hear a lot.
Yeah, those players are definitely going to be under intense scrutiny between now and November 23rd.
For sure.
And this is where we really need to transition to those bigger structural headwinds facing the league. Because all this draft excitement, it's happening under this enormous shadow of the collective bargaining agreement negotiations.
Right, the CBA. The WNBA is currently locked in talks with the Players Union over a new one. The initial deadline was October 31st.
Yeah.
But they agreed to push that back to November 30th. Now, that extension, it doesn't feel like a relief, does it? It feels more like just a brief pause in the high-stakes pressure cooker.
I think that's right. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the reason this date matters so much is that the April draft and really the entire off-season free agency calendar, it's all predicated on successfully negotiating this CBA. Without a new agreement, everything just stalls. But beyond just the date, we need to talk about why these negotiations might be tough.
Yeah. Why is this one potentially so difficult, especially when the league seems to be growing?
Well, the primary sticking points, especially in a rapidly expanding league like the WNBA, they usually center on that balance between revenue sharing and player experience.
Okay.
Players are pushing hard for improved travel standards, the whole commercial flights versus charters debate.
Always a big one.
Always. Higher minimum salaries, too, and an increased salary cap overall to accommodate the influx of new talent and just the growth of the overall pie. The league is growing revenue, but the players want to ensure their piece of that growth is immediately reflective of the new valuation.
Okay, so if that November 30th deadline were to pass without a deal, it wouldn't just halt the draft. It could potentially hold up implementing roster rules that might be absolutely necessary given the league's other major structural change and expansion.
That's the critical link right there. Simultaneous to the CBA talks, the league is expanding from 12 to 15 teams this season.
15 teams. The 2 new franchises are the Portland Fire and the Toronto Tempo. I mean, this is massive news, a 25% increase in the number of teams. It's a huge sign of health. But structurally, thinking about it, it sounds like a nightmare.
It definitely creates significant complexity. The league is instantly facing talent dilution for one.
Right.
When you add 2 teams, you suddenly need about 24 additional roster spots filled. Now, this means more roles for players who maybe wouldn't have made a 12-team roster.
Which is good for the players' union, presumably.
True, but it also necessitates big changes to scheduling, travel, all that logistical stuff.
That's the part I find fascinating, just the math of 15. Scheduling becomes an absolute beast, right? You can't have a clean rotational home and away schedule with 15 teams.
Nope.
It guarantees someone is always facing unbalanced travel or some competitive disparity. And this will inherently increase the pressure for better travel solutions.
Which circles right back to the CBA negotiations, see how it's all tied together. And the expansion draft details for the Fire and the Tempo, they haven't even been announced yet. But we know historically, expansion teams would pick their initial rosters after the lottery teams secured their first picks.
Okay.
So the results on November 23rd will directly inform how Portland and Toronto start to build their foundations.
So these 2 new teams, they're operating completely in the dark on 2 huge fronts. They don't know the exact rules governing the veterans they can acquire because the CBA terms might change those rules. And they don't know the specifics yet of their ability to select established players in that expansion draft.
They have to operate with these dual priorities, really. They need established veterans who can provide leadership and some instant competitiveness. Otherwise, they just become historical punching bags for the first few years.
Yeah, nobody wants that.
But they also desperately need cheap, controlled rookie contracts coming out of this draft to build for the future cap-wise.
Okay. So given the deep nature of this draft class, like you said, no singular number 1 count, maybe the incoming rookies are actually perfect cost-controlled additions for an expansion team.
Could be.
Like needing depth across the board rather than one player who commands an immediate superstar salary. Maybe it helps mitigate that talent dilution headache a bit.
That's a really interesting angle. And if we connect this all back to that initial draft dynamic, the pressure is truly on Dallas and Minnesota.
With those top picks.
With those top potential picks, yeah. They have to decide if they value a guaranteed top rookie, a Betts, a Fudd, a Miles more than they value of a veteran who one of the new expansion teams might trade away to avoid losing them in the expansion draft anyway.
Oh, wow. So the expansion draft threat could create trade opportunities before the draft even happens.
Potentially. The high value of those traded picks that Minnesota and Seattle hold, it now impacts not just the bottom 5 teams, but the 2 new franchises entirely. It's all interconnected.
Okay, let's try and bring this all together for you listening. We've sort of unpacked the power dynamics of the lottery, right? Where Dallas has this incredible leverage.
Yep, guaranteed top 3.
But traded picks held by teams like Minnesota have successfully, maybe unintentionally, weaponized the anti-tanking system.
Seems that way.
We know the draft class itself is deep, which maybe lowers the trade value of the number 1 overall pick itself, but makes the whole top end ideal for teams needing high-quality depth, like those expansion teams. And all of this is moving forward while the league is juggling this critical CBA deadline, which dictates player welfare, salary structure, maybe even travel, and managing the structural pain of moving to 15 teams.
And if you connect this to the bigger picture, these interconnected pieces are basically forcing general managers to make bets not just on player talent, but on regulatory outcome.
Right, betting on the CBA outcome almost.
Exactly. The CBA terms will dictate the cap space, the roster spots, the travel schedule, the lottery results dictate the talent flow. All of it together fundamentally reshapes the entire competitive landscape of the WNBA.
Absolutely. And thinking about the pressure specifically on those new franchises, Portland Fire and Toronto Tempo, here's something maybe to mull over.
Okay.
Since the draft comes first, right, November 23rd, and the expansion draft details are still unknown and possibly tied somehow to the CBA outcome.
Right, we don't know the rules yet.
Are Portland and Toronto secretly, maybe, hoping the CBA negotiations actually drag on a bit? Could that potentially lead to a more favorable veteran player dispersal or maybe relaxed roster rules later on that actually aid their immediate competitiveness? That's the kind of structural tension, the unknown variable you need to think about as we wait for all these draft and expansion details to finally drop.